Welcome back to the instructor's review of the BELP slide set for 2014. We are now on to day two. Day two is, we start with the agenda, the same one we had on day one. And then that takes us into session 5, where we are now going to go through the step that was identifying 6 to 8 strengths and opportunities for improvement. All this should be quite familiar to you. Basic statements here. A little bit more length of the amount of basics that there are, considering that the strength and OFIs are pretty important. And then this is where we start to go through and give people their specific examples of what you would expect to see in the way in which a comment might be written or an observation. And in this particular case, we continuously are trying to stress the term nerd for nuggets, example, relevance, and done. General observation is that the nugget is the most important thing. It's the shortest statement you can make that actually conveys what it is you want to convey. The E and the R part are what you put on if you need to, but you do have people focus on the nugget part of the nerd process. So it's nuggets, example, relevance, and then you're done. So we go through and we just give them examples of how this might show up and allow people to have that conversation. These are coming from the Collin Technologies case, so these should be familiar to them. Okay. And again, on each slide, it's just bringing back up that reinforcement of the nerd statement. Okay, now we go and we say, okay, you've done this on your own. Now let's go ahead and have you do this within a table and have that kind of conversation going on at your table. This should largely be the kind of work that people are going to be doing today, is a lot of table work. Then at the end of this, you then start to say, so what have you learned now in your table activity? In this particular case, we have a few pieces that we would hopefully see people having picked up as they went through. You should not show the little ones that come in like here with the rigor of process steps, those kind of things, until after people have done a certain amount of brainstorming. Okay, and so that's the end of session 5. At that point, you should be taking your morning break. Now we do session 6. Session 6, now we're moved on to the scoring portion of this. We're asking people to understand the scoring guidelines associated with the ADLI matrix. So this is where we are trying to also reinforce it as we go into the scoring area. We're going to start to use words like many, most. In this particular case, we're also going to be using words like overall, basic, and multiple. And so this is a reiteration of what we showed, I think, already earlier in the class about what is basic, what is overall, and what is the multiple item requirements. In this particular case, this is drawn directly from the current TBEM manual, this 2.2 strategy implementation. So if they use their manual, they'd see exactly what these words are here, and then we just overlaid on the basic, overall, and multiple pieces of it. Okay, similarly, we're carrying forward pretty much the intended content of the scoring material for the process items. This is a little bit different words than what you'll find in the blue book, but it's pretty much aligned to what there is. It's just reformatted a little bit so we can get that information into a slide format. And now we're going through and we're letting people see that by the color coding as to whether things are being perceived as A for approach, the approach is yellow, excuse me, is green, the deployment Y, the deployment is blue, and then the learning is red. And so you're seeing that a statement that might be made by the integration is black. That a statement being made might relate more or less to one or the other of the scoring dimensions. Okay, similarly, letting people go through and take a look at these things and getting that idea of the words you're using, is that related to which piece of the dimensions of the criteria. Again, from what we were talking about for the work done on the previous day, we want to have people give a lot more focus on the A and the D as far as approach and deployment are going to be the main things that are going to be talked about in most companies. You'd have to be a fairly high level, high scoring company for there to be all that much focus into the L and the I dimensions, and certainly even in that case, the learning dimension is a lot more oriented. That you'd have a lot more content that you could put in for learning than integration, because learning is about getting better even on the individual things you do. Integration is more about the way in which things get linked together and in a way that makes it so they support and basically multiply a final outcome. Again, we're just kind of giving the students a lot of opportunity to look at what other people have been writing. Part of the intention of this is that adult learners tend to learn better if they have examples of what the expected outcomes might be, and there'd be some opportunity for people to talk about these both as the way in which somebody might write the materials, as well as how it might be interpreted by a reader. In this case, we're now moving on to the idea of the enablers and stoppers. It's the thing that says that when you do go back to your scoring guidelines, to ensure that they are looking and saying what kind of statements have they done in their nerd area that would imply that a particular scoring dimension might land in one band versus another band. So in general, the way we're doing that is to say, here's the statements that support the band I'm recommending, and that the reason it doesn't go into another band is that there's a statement that I've made that does not match whichever that other band is that it might go into. So the stopper piece, in this case, we're showing red for the stoppers. It says that the words that you see in red are words that are not in agreement with what the scoring guidelines would say in that same band. So make sure people understand that the red ones are basically saying this is not the place for this to be. Okay, and so then go through the overall brainstorming conversation about why do you use the ADLI matrix. And intention is that by doing a little bit more of this kind of breakdown of the way in which you look at an item, you'll tend to get more consistent scoring, and in a process where the scores are used for the purpose of doing some award areas, people do want to make sure that we have as much extra rigor we have to making the scores be ones that are related to what's actually going on in the company, and to try to take as much variability associated with the assessors out of the process. Having said that, we do expect there's a certain amount of variability that comes in because of assessors, but the ADLI helps us to reduce that. Okay, and now we go into the matrix so that we can take a look at this, and in the step 5, again, we're going through the basics of this, which is that the scoring as you do it should align with what you've stated in your comments. And so now we ask people to break out into their groups and actually go through and say, what would you recommend as a score band for this particular process item? That then takes us up to where we're saying we think we know about where the score is. Let's go ahead and do a little extra work on the comments. In this case, drafting feedback, writing comments. You'll see that the order that we're doing this is different than what the order is in that particular graphic, the one that comes from the Baldrige program. And basically, it's okay for us to do it this way. The scoring and the writing of comments is kind of an interactive. It goes both ways. What you want to do is you want to have the comments you're putting in align with whatever the score range is that you're suggesting, and so you may find as you go to scoring that it implies you should do some other comments. As you're doing comments, it might imply that you change some scoring. So we expect people to go back and forth between those two processes to a certain extent. Okay, 3 elements of a good comment. What's going on now? Why do we care about this? And how is it going to impact the business if we don't do something about it? Okay, simple enough. It's not a bad slide to way that you can present that and have those conversations. And then we go through and we give examples. People can go through and say, how does this example feel right or not? Same thing for the opportunities for improvement. So overall, on comment writing, we're giving these. This is now our brief thing where you will show that and ask people to think about it for a few minutes, for a moment or two, and then say, okay, the comment should not be very, and then ask the class, which of these items, which of the things on the right-hand side should fit into there, and as they suggest, okay, this, well, then you can go and say, okay, well, then generic. So as each time you press the mouse button or the keyboard, it'll just take the next answer up to there. So you can basically take people through this overall online area here until they've used up all the choices. Okay, now we're going on to the basics. Step 6 is understanding who the customer for the comments are, and to ensure that you are following the guidelines that will make these most useful to the customer of the comment. Okay, and that brings us then over to the more specific comment guidelines. These guidelines are ones that are pretty much universal both in the TBEM process, and they also are pretty much taken from the materials that are also used for the Baldrige process. So this is pretty consistent commenting guidelines for all people who use these criteria across the world. Further statements about the comment guidelines, and now we go through, we get some sample feedback ready comments that might be made from the NERD observations that were made, and make sure that people understand that when it comes down to it, the person who's going to finally be responsible for doing the feedback ready comments is going to be the item lead from the team. So while we would like people in their individual assessment to consider how to write feedback ready comments, at the end of the day, this is going to be something that they're going to need to be very good at as part of the preparation towards site visits. So the consensus process very much is dependent upon people being able to do good feedback ready comments. Again, we're just giving them lots of opportunities to take a look at what other people have been doing. And then as we get towards the end of this piece on the comment writing, we now start to say, well, here's this, why do you know, is it a good one or not? And if not, what's the problem? And how might you change it so that it gets a bit better? So again, we have multiple examples here to help them take a look at this. Part of the idea of this is to encourage them to review their own work as well, and to go through cycles of improvement for their own commenting. Okay, and again, significant numbers of examples to help you through there. You can decide how much of those you need to go to. And that's the end of session 6, which should bring us to the lunch break.